So, determining the critical path. Remember, the critical path is the shortest possible path that you can take to get every job done. That doesn't mean the shortest path that you can make. It's the shortest path that will allow you to get everything done. Okay? So make sure that you're very familiar with that. So what we're going to do is just going to go to the video. We'll play that and stop it occasionally to do some notes.
Welcome to this video on determining the critical path. In our last video, we looked at the first bullet point in our task and how to create a network diagram showing the tasks in the project. In this video, we'll be focusing on the second and third bullet points, asking us to show the tasks in the critical path of the project, as well as the minimum length of time required to complete the project. Now, both of these are achieved level skills, meaning you must know how to do these to pass the internal. So, what is a critical path? Well, it's the path of tasks that takes the most time to complete.
But it's not, because the critical path is going to be the longest path that gets everything done in the shortest possible amount of time. Does that sound weird? Okay? But you're going to see examples of it, and it gets less weird once you see what it means. Okay? So be careful. And when you're thinking about these, the whole goal is to make the shortest path possible, but that means you're going to use the longest path available because everything has to get done. So keep that in mind, and he'll explain it as well. Okay.
The network diagram, a path is just a certain way you can go from task to task following the arrows. For critical path, there are 3 requirements. First, you must start your path on a task which does not have any arrows going into it, like tasks A or B. Second, you must follow the arrows in the correct direction. You cannot go in the opposite direction that the arrows are showing.
Okay, so let's think about how we can write that in steps. So your starting point always has to be a task that has no precedence. In other words, nothing has to be done before that. So in this particular case, we could start at A or we could start at B, right? Because those are the only 2 that don't have any arrows leading to them, right? The second thing that he was talking about is you must follow the direction of the arrows. Remember yesterday we said that you can't use like a double arrow, can't go back and forth. You have to be going in one direction and one direction only. This task leads to this task and this task only, right? So this arrow leads to that. So we have to follow the arrows. Now, I think that if you, when you're doing this, use a highlighter or something to make sure that you're marking the paths as you go, then it'll make your life a little easier. Okay? And you're going to see he's going to do something similar. Okay? So we're just going to follow every possible path and make a list of them. So we'll stop again for notes in just a moment.
And third, you must finish your path on a task which does not have any arrows going out of it, like task K. So let's follow a couple of simple...
Okay, so that's the third step. Must finish on a task with no arrows going out of it. Which makes sense because that's a kind of a termination. So couldn't finish with I because I has an arrow coming out of it, right? This one, no matter what I do, I have to finish at K because it's the only box that doesn't have some arrows coming out of it. Make sense? Okay, so it has to be start with no arrows coming into it, finish with no arrows going out of it. So definite stop and starting point. Pretty clear. Okay.
Steps in order to determine the critical path. Our first step is writing down the list of tasks in each path. So we'll start off with task A, our first task.
So this list is going to be the part you're going to show on your work. So make sure you're writing these steps down. So first, write down the list of the task in the path. And you don't have to write it down as, pave the driveway or whatever. Just task A, task B, task C, just the letters will be fine. Okay? So write down the list of tasks in the path. Okay? And you're going to do this for each path. So you're going to have several of these.
And then take an arrow to task D, and then follow this arrow to task K. That's our first path. Our second step is to add up each task's duration to find the path's length.
Okay?
So we look at
So after you've written down the path itself, so this path, and he'll write them down in a moment. So this path is A, D, K, right? So you'll just add up the time that it would take. So you're going to make a little chart, and you'll see it in just a moment what it looks like. So you're going to make a little chart of these pathways, and it's important that you stay organized and you make this chart very readable. It's critical to being able to do the rest of the work that we're going to work on these. So here's what he's doing. So he's listing the things and about to add up the.
for each task in the path, tasks A, D, and K. Then we look at the durations 4, 2, and 3, and we just add them together. So 4 plus 2 plus 3, which equals 9. Now it's important to add hours at the end because the person who is marking your assessment likes to know that you understand the context behind the critical path. You can find the unit that the time is measured in your resource table.
No unit, no credit.
You just have to do this for every other possible path in the network diagram. We'll start at task A again, and if you go along this arrow to task D, you'll notice that there's no other possible path to take. So we go down this arrow this time to task C, and then we take the first arrow up to task E, and then the next arrow to task F, then the next arrow to task J, and finally the next arrow to task K. That's our second path, and next we add up each task's duration to find the path's length. So it's 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 5 plus 7 plus 3, which equals 24 hours. So for our third path, we start from A again and go along this arrow to task C again. And now if you'll notice, if you go along this arrow, you're in no other possible path you can go along. So we go to the next arrow, down to task G. Then we go along the only arrow which is going out of task G to task I, and then along this arrow to task K. That's our third path, and then we add 4 plus 3 plus 6 plus 2 plus 3, which equals 18 hours. For our next.
Now again, I'm going to pause for just a second to show you that. Now, he's done a path here going through some of these values. So going through there, now he's gone through here. Notice that uses this link to C twice, right? And then you're going to use it again to do this path. So you can use the arrows more than one time. So don't think that once you've done it, it's done. It may, especially in the starting point, if you look at that, there's a lot of stuff coming to the same boxes there. So you'll use those arrows as many times as you have the arrows going out of that next task. So be aware that you can use them more than one time. Okay? All right.
Path, we start at task A again and go along the arrow to task C again. And now you'll notice that if you go along this arrow, there's no other paths you can take which aren't the same as the last one. So we go along this arrow to task A. Then we go along the only arrow to task I. Then we go along the only arrow to task K. Then we add up the durations of each task in the path. So it's 4 plus 3 plus 9 plus 2 plus 3, which equals 21 hours. Next, you'll notice that if you go along this arrow, there's no other possible paths you can take which haven't already been gone along before. So this time, we'll start from task B. Then we'll take the only arrow to task A. Then we'll go along the only arrow to task I. Then we'll go along the only arrow to task K. Then we add up the duration of each task, so it's 3 plus 9 plus 2 plus 3, which equals 17 hours. Now, there's no other possible path we can take, but we haven't already taken, which means we've found every path that we need to find the critical path. So, our first step is to use the longest time to determine the critical path and its length.
Okay, stop for a moment to give you a chance to write that down. So you're going to be, again, we're talking about the shortest possible route that you can take, but it's going to be the longest one on your list. Okay? So use the longest time to determine the critical path. So when you add up all of these possible routes, whichever one takes the most time, that's the critical path. It's the shortest amount of time that you can get everything done, right? But it's always going to be the longest one. Mm-hmm.
The longest time is pretty obviously 24 hours, meaning that the critical path is A, C, E, F, J, and K. Now, in your exam, if you want to write it out, something like the critical path is A, C, F, E, J, K, with a length of 24 hours.
Okay. And he disappeared. Okay, so that's all there is to finding the critical path. And if you do the drawing, and then you determine the critical path and tell us what that critical path is by just listing the task names, there's just the alphabetical values, and then tell us how many hours that will take, or days, because you could be doing something in days or minutes, whatever. Put it with the right units, then that's an achieved. So you get an achieved for adding. Okay? Not bad. Okay. And we're not going to rush these modules. We're going to go back to that same practice exercise that we started yesterday, and then let you determine the critical paths. And remember, the answers are there for you on the OneNote. So make sure that you're checking them as you go to make sure you're getting the same information. Now, do remember though that they wrote it in a slightly different manner, right? That doesn't make any difference. You're still going to see that list of tasks, A, B, C, whatever, blah, 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 equals 12 hours. You'll still see the information, but it's going to be presented in a slightly different way than in the video. I think the video is much more organized than the way that the work is done on that other page. But if you disagree, do it the way they did it. There's no right or wrong way to do it as long as you have all of the information. So far, we have our diagram, and we've found the critical path, and we've written out the tasks and the time. So we're going to look at the diagram, and we're going to look at the sentence that you write. Okay? So make sure those are the two things that we're going to grade. It's actually three things: the task and the time, right? And what the time mean. So those three things will get you an achieved. Okay? All right. So just go to your OneNote, look at that practice assessment. Remember, that is an actual past exam, so it's got all the things in there you need. And you're going to determine the critical path and practice writing out a sentence for that one. We're going to do, every homework we do is just going to come straight from one of these old tests. So I'm going to look through and see if I can find some more, and I'll post them if you think you need more practice. But it'd be better if you just study the notes so you'll know how to do any of them. Mm-hmm.